Welcome back. You're listening to the Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Gary DiPreta, the Area Vice President for Defense, Intelligence, and Aerospace at Splunk. Now, Gary, we just got into the data conversation, the importance of data, understanding what data you have, and answering questions that you've thought of and that you haven't thought of yet. The whole piece of this, as we talk about cybersecurity and the challenges, really tags back to the bigger discussion on IT modernization. So maybe let's start there a little bit. And what are you starting to see? What kind of trends maybe are you seeing where the intersection of IT modernization and cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I think by the nature of upgrading legacy systems, there's inherent improvement in your cyber posture, right? So if you look, let's take an example that most agencies are either doing today or looking at, certainly well beyond looking at, but moving applications to the cloud, right? So that's kind of an easy trend, and inherently you simplify your kind of operations and attack vector and that provides improved cybersecurity among other benefits. But one of the things we see with agencies is, and I'm not saying all agencies, but simply by moving applications to the cloud, you still have to, for example, as it relates to cybersecurity, have continuous monitoring, right? You have to still have situational awareness of what's going on, sort of within your application. So whether they reside on-prem or not, you still have to be, RMF compliant in DoD or DFAR compliant or, NIST 853. So, without sort of using too strong of words, there's a tendency to think that, I've outsourced it to, to a cloud provider, then my job here is done. And really, it's not. You still have to be compliant in the framework that NIST has set out. So while I see inherent improvements, I definitely think that agencies are still struggling with, okay, in those new models, what are my responsibilities? So that's just kind of one comment. A little closer to home, if you look at the security information and event management space, right, the SIM platforms, what we see is there's, like any other technology, there's a lot of sort of outdated platforms still in use. And really what it becomes is an access to innovation. So right now we're in a big cycle for upgrading, the SIMs, which run everyone's security operations center. And if you're not doing it today, you have to be doing market research, right? Like any new technology, the next generation SIMs provide access to things like machine learning, right? And so we talked about known and unknown threats. So the agencies that are investing the time in market research to see what has changed in some of these platforms and how they can apply it are the ones that are are going to do well. So a lot of what we're seeing today, again, as it relates to our space and cybersecurity, is around SIM replacements, and so we're helping agencies with a lot of market research there.
When agencies want to improve their security incident management, again, we go back to the tool discussion, right? Are they just saying, "Hey, what tool can I use?" Or are you guys able to kind of pull them back and be like, "It's not a tool; it's what questions are you trying to answer?" Is that again?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it's funny because getting back to the platform discussion, the agencies who are doing it really well are looking at kind of that full cyber continuum, right? I'm talking about the operational continuum. So, and what I mean by that is, a question you have to ask yourself if you're an agency is, I should be able to detect, an anomaly or a threat in seconds, and I should be able to respond in minutes. And then the third leg in the stool is, I need to have a continuous monitoring capability, which, Jason, you and I both know is huge, certainly with the DHS CDM program and with, the RMF DFAR compliance requirements. The continuous monitoring aspect that replaces DIACAP is just huge. But if I'm an agency and if you can't do that today, if you can't detect something in seconds, respond in minutes, and then have a continuous monitoring capability, then you're really not implementing available technology like Splunk, like these next generation SIMs today. So unfortunately, what we're finding is most agencies are still using legacy SIMs that don't have that next generation capability, right?
You bring up CDM, one of my favorite topics.
Yep.
I know Splunk is a big player. I realize that you are in the defense world,
Sure.
so CDM maybe doesn't necessarily fit into your world, but give us at least a big view update of CDM as it relates to Splunk.
Yeah, well, we're really proud. Actually, a peer of mine, Frank Domina, was asked to testify in front of Congress about Splunk and our position on the DHS CDM program just recently. So we're really proud of that. But what Splunk does in simple terms, without getting into too many details, we're the integration layer, the data fabric layer that we had talked about for the CDM program, right? So we're there to, ingest the data and provide that visibility.
I know that Splunk has had some success as well with some of the wins, so it's something to obviously look out for as we talk to some of your folks in the civilian world. At the same time, while the Defense Department and the intelligence community is not required, quote unquote, to use CDM, they have requirements to move to continuous monitoring. Maybe do a best practices discussion,
Sure.
a little bit about what you're seeing in the DoD world and the Intel world.
Yeah, so there's a few use cases that we're seeing within DoD and Intel in sort of no order of priority. But the first one is RMF compliance. So without a doubt, with some of the mandates coming out, and again moving from DIACAP to a continuous monitoring platform, it's a real challenge for agencies. It's not an easy thing to do. So without a doubt, over the past 12 months, I mean, literally every agency within DoD and Intel, Jason, are talking to Splunk about, how to solve that. And one of the things that we do, we make it easy. We have something called the Splunk Base, and think of it as like an iTunes store for applications, and they're free apps. And what they really are is just, things that you can apply for use. So you can download an RMF app, you can download a DFAR app, which already maps to the NIST, standards. And so that's number one. And number two is it gets back to that continuous monitoring capability. So without a doubt, in DoD and Intel, RMF DFAR compliance and the defense industrial base are a use case that's pervasive that we're working with our agencies with. The second one we're really, really proud of is on the cyber protection teams. So we know that Cyber Command stood up the cyber mission forces, and Splunk is, virtually in most of the Department of Defense cyber protection team stacks. So, U.S. Army, Navy, MAR4 Cyber, U.S. Cyber Command are kind of all using that. And that really speaks to the incident response capability of the platform, right? So, and then the third one is, our kind of baseline, which is just in visibility and detecting threats, which is kind of the threat hunting capability. And of course, that is table stakes. If you're in a security operations center, we're used pervasively across most of the DoD agencies to do that search and investigate function for threat hunting. And then I already mentioned the fourth use case that is probably the most I don't want to say popular, but we're getting the most questions in the formal market research, is the Department of Defense is going through that SIM upgrade cycle right now. So again, those are just four uses that we are seeing in the Department of Defense, but again, it's not four separate tools, right? If you ingest the data once, you can do threat hunting, you can do incident response, you can do, you can have executive dashboards and have operational situational awareness in your security operations center, and apply these very cool sort of technologies that are coming to market, namely machine learning, right, to detect these anomalies. That's one big trend that our DoD, in fact, all of our federal agencies, but DoD and Intel in particular, is being able to leverage machine learning algorithms. And the second one, as it relates to security operations centers, and we are getting like tons of interest in data on this, is on orchestration and automation. So if you think about it, we talked about the skills gap, within the federal government and with industry, but what about just sort of the exhaustion of the analyst, right? You're just inundated with alerts, and what's happening as a trend in the industry and what's getting a lot of interest is there's very cool what's called SOAR technology, security orchestration and automation. And we, as a side note, acquired a company earlier this calendar year called Phantom. They were market leader in security orchestration. So tons of interest because you have to automate these playbooks, right? The DoD, it doesn't matter who you are, you can't throw enough bodies at it. So you're going to have to automate and orchestrate detection and response. And so we're talking to a lot of agencies on implementing SOAR technologies to increase the efficiencies of their operation.
All right, so there's a ton to unpack there.
Yep.
Let's back up. One of the things when you talk about the different use cases, is there a big difference between what DoD is doing with the risk management framework and the changes and what CDM is doing? I mean, yes, different tools and different approaches, but in the end, they're all heading to the same end goal, which is the continuous monitoring.
Correct. So I think that what they have in common, and which is a very good thing, right, is the continuous monitoring. You have to have that as part of your cybersecurity framework. So, across the DoD, Intel, and civilian, the .gov space under CDM, they're all doing that really well. But what I think that what they're trying to achieve ultimately is the speed to detection and response, right? And so that's kind of future phases of CDM, and I don't feel comfortable in a public forum going into what maybe some of our DoD and Intel agencies are doing, other than to say, it is about using machine learning toolkits to detect anomalies and use the analytics. And then, of course, again, to automate the detection and the response.
You also bring up orchestration automation. I hear that all the time from agencies, from vendors. That and relates back to the machine learning and AI stuff. Is that the future? I mean, is that where we're going as we kind of close out our conversation here a little bit? When we look to the future and the takeaways from this conversation, it seems to me, based on what you guys have said, is it's the data and then it's the tools that help you understand the data.
Yeah, and here's what I would tell you, Jason. It's the really cool part about this. It's really not the future. Like, these tools are available today.
I meant just tomorrow future, right?
Yeah. No. That's that's the exciting part. The answer is yes. I mean, we're not going to, with the threats, right? The actors, especially the nation state actors, we cannot throw enough bodies at this problem. We're not going to build walls high enough, right? So it's about building. And I happened to be at a forum this week with Admiral Barrett spoke, and I loved what she said. And what she said is, look, we've got to sort of build resilient systems to deal with the pain, and so that's what the machine learning and orchestration automation are going to do is it's speed, and it's creating very resilient capabilities within the agencies. And so we're excited. We're excited that this generation of innovation is going to really make an impact in cybersecurity.
And you mentioned workforce a couple of times. Splunk is doing something very special in the workforce too to help promote that as well.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for reminding me. So Splunk has a foundation called Splunk for Good, and one of the things that we did in federal is we asked, the foundation, Splunk for Good, to really give back and invest in the federal community, mainly our active duty military and veterans. And so last September, we announced free training for all active duty military and veterans and their families. So it hasn't even been a year yet. We have last I checked, last month was well over 4,700 people enrolled for free Splunk training, which gets you certified. And for those transitioning active duty military, we also provide a portal, which is jobs in the open market for Splunk. So it's our way of giving back to our community here in federal, and more specifically vets and the active duty military.
All right. Well, guys, thank you for doing that. I'm sure we can't say thank you enough to the veterans and our service members and their families. So again, another great example of giving back. But unfortunately, we are out of time.
No.
So this has been a great conversation. Let me thank my guest, Gary DiPreta, the Area Vice President for Defense, Intelligence, and Aerospace at Splunk. Gary, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason.
I'm Jason Miller. You've been listening to Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search innovation.